We now turn to what has been the story of the day, quite frankly, because it involves what's happening in Iraq, but there's also a lot more from Benghazi. Let's start first of all with the story that has captivated all of us here for a number of days. The sights emerging from Iraq are graphic, brutal, and more than a little disturbing. Extremists and terrorists are engaged in new fighting almost every hour. And now America has another 275 Marines on hand to protect our embassy in Baghdad. To give us some perspective of what may be going on under difficult conditions, please welcome in former Navy SEAL and a member of the Virginia House of Delegates from the 85th District, Scott Taylor, joins us on Midpoint today. Scott, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Give us an idea, if you will, and again, I know that you specifically wouldn't know the layout here, but we're talking now about 275 Marines and Army troops are being sent to the embassy in Baghdad. What exactly do you think they're going through right now? What would be the setup here as they try to gain control? Certainly the insurgents are not in Baghdad yet, but to at least get themselves ready and take control of this embassy.
No, I mean they have to be in there because of course we have $1 billion embassy there, and we certainly have American personnel, whether official or not, private contractors. It's sort of the embassy could be a rallying point for Americans who are in the country should the insurgents get to Baghdad and attack it. But the president, of course, first stated that he would not have any troops on the ground. Of course, I know he's adverse to that, but the reality of the situation is if they do get into Baghdad, we have American interest there, and even though he doesn't want that to happen, the responsibility that he has to protect those Americans that are there certainly supersedes his political ideology.
Well, I think that has to be said here because while there's a lot of discussion about, and some critics are coming out saying, see, we told you there would be boots on the ground, you've sent new troops in essence, isn't this different here? Because when we're talking about the actual embassy security itself, this is necessary in order to make sure that there is not, and I'll say it out loud, another Benghazi?
Absolutely. I mean, I think people are going to criticize him no matter what he does, but the reality of the situation is we have huge assets there, we have people there. They have to have some kind of protection. Now, that's not to say that security force, which it is a security force that's going there, couldn't turn into a combat scenario if they're getting attacked, in which they have every right to do so. So that may happen. I mean, quite frankly, taking a step back, the fact that we didn't get a status of forces agreement and leave a stabilizing force back here has certainly contributed to where we are today, not just with the deteriorating security in the country or the Islamicists, but also with the political deterioration as well and the very poor governing of Maliki.
Now, we call this a security force, but give us an idea, if you will, of what you would suppose this is made of, because this is still a military force, and I would imagine these are still troops that are ready for combat, no matter how you slice it and call them security troops, correct?
That's correct. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, these are most likely all Marines, and they're absolutely armed for combat, and they need to be, of course, if there is a potential for the insurgents to get to Baghdad and attack and have American interest. The people, the embassy, the private contractors, our assets need to be protected. So those guys need to be armed and ready and prepared for war.
Let me get your opinion on what we have seen coming out of here. We have seen the ISIS group and a number of these Islamists, these suspected terrorists, however you want to phrase them here. We've seen video and we've seen pictures the last couple of days of what absolutely amount to nothing but atrocities. The taking of prisoners, the abuse of prisoners, the shooting them in the head, putting them into graves, mass graves, and executing them one by one. It's something that Americans are not really quite ready to deal with in many ways, but from a militaristic standpoint, wouldn't you say that this is expected when you get to certain levels of terrorists and certain levels of individuals who are trying to create as much havoc and mayhem as possible?
I mean, that's pretty much the very definition of terrorism. I mean, this is the image they want to project. They want to terrorize the population in order to have less resistance. Americans aren't ready for that because it's not something that we see every day. We're absolutely aghast and appalled when we do see these things, and it is a disgusting thing. But you're absolutely right. Once you get into a certain level, and of course, these guys were booted out of Al-Qaeda. What does that tell you? That they're being against their own civilians and things like that, that they're being way overboard. But I think it's important to note here that it's not simply ISIS that's here, that's taken over this. They have help as well, too. We've had reports that there was a former general for Saddam Hussein who was leading the charge in one of these cities. And that's very important to note because that guy's not Al-Qaeda. He's not part of ISIS. He's a Sunni, though. And I think that, again, not having the status of forces agreement, not having a stabilizing force there that stabilizes not only the unrest from the sectarian violence, but also the political process and making sure that people aren't alienated, which is what's happened under Maliki. He's really shut out the Sunnis and been very, very Shia dominant. So you have other factions who are actually aiding the Islamicists getting there. And of course, we all know the reports of the money that they were able to get out of Mosul. So I have no doubt that they're also paying some of these guys off, some of the soldiers. They could easily pay them more than they'll make in years and years if they just go walk away. So it's definitely important to note that there is certainly a Sunni coalition here that's at work, and not simply the ISIS, however bad they may be.
Is the most distressing thing here is that America spent tens of billions of dollars to build a militaristic force in Iraq, call it a security force, call it police, call it military, whatever you want to, and they are unable to defend their own country.
Absolutely. It's very distressing. You see the same thing in Afghanistan. You see people on both sides in Afghanistan, pro-American and anti-American, are watching what's happening here, and they're probably planning for what's going to happen there. So I think I'm going to take us back a step and say again, one of the regardless of whether you think we should have been in Iraq or not, we're there. That's where we find ourselves. And the lack of that status of forces agreement and the lack of a stabilizing American force, which nobody wants it to happen, but it has to happen to ensure good governance and then lack of sectarian violence. Because we don't have that, this is what we're seeing right now. And absolutely, when certainly vets like myself, I served in Ramadi and Habaniya and Baghdad and other folks who were there way longer than me, better men than me, better women than me. They see this, and it's very disheartening because they put their lives on the line to help Iraq secure itself, and they're seeing this. And I think again, it's part of the reason why we're seeing this sectarian and this breakup of a nation state of Iraq is because of not having a stabilizing force left behind in a status of forces agreement, giving immunity to that stabilizing force.
Scott, here comes a difficult question, and we have asked this of a number of people here today, a number of analysts and folks who have talked about this as well. The fact that, for whatever reason, it seems that Iraq is almost lost to some people, that the battle continues there, that we are considering the possibility of airstrikes, more involvement. We have had people here today and on a number of shows who have said that as far as getting involved with Iran or trying to say this country, stop. Get out now. It's a shame of what's happened, but we've got to cut our losses right now. Let them do to themselves whatever they're going. I'm paraphrasing now here. Let them do whatever they want to do to themselves, but it's time for America to walk away and let happen whatever is going to happen all by itself. What do you think?
Well, I think that there's people on all sides of this, and no matter what their political ideology or persuasion is, there's definitely reasonable people with thought processes on either one. Again, with the lack of that status of forces agreement and stabilization forces left behind, we now find ourselves in what I am afraid is a post-nation state Iraq, where you have a Sunni area, you have a Shia area, and you have a Kurd area who, the Kurds aren't even fighting. They took what they needed, Kirkuk, and they're hunkering down and waiting it out. I think that at this moment, I don't agree with joining forces with Iran because again, if you do that, you also alienate the Saudis, because remember there's a proxy war going on here, Sunni and Shia, and I think that I'm afraid that because we didn't get that status of forces agreement and because we don't have a stabilizing force, that now going back in there is probably a bad thing for us.
Please go ahead, finish.
But I think I'm afraid that what we're seeing here is a post-nation state Iraq that's going to be broken up into three parts, and quite frankly, without serious loss of life and treasure going back in there, I just don't see it happening.
From a soldier's perspective then, and you mentioned the Sunnis and the Shias, there are so many factions that are going on here. This has been going on for centuries now. But from the soldier's perspective, those who fight here, those who die, who put their life on the line here, do you get the feeling that no matter what we do, it is simply going to be impossible to bring these different factions together under any roof whatsoever, get them to sit down at the same table, get them to govern together, that we're wasting our time by trying to put them all together?
Well, here's an interesting point. When Saddam was there, he was Sunni, minority, right?
Yes. And
he didn't bring everybody together. He just ruled with an iron fist and, I'm going to kill you and your brother and your sister, and so you're not going to rise against me. What America did do, to its credit, was shepherd different factions, because you have Sunni Arabs, Shia Arabs, Turkmen, Kurds. We had everybody together at the table. We had everybody there when we were there as a, we were a stabilizing force, and we actually got folks to legislate and elect folks that were different coalitions, and they were actually a functioning government. When you pulled out and you didn't have the Status Forces Agreement, you didn't have a stabilizing force there, sectarian violence started happening, because the political process, when you had Maliki, who's a Shia, started alienating everybody, replacing generals with only Shia folks, replacing folks in the cabinet with just Shia folks, and was very dominant in that regard as a proxy, by the way, of Iran. So when that political process broke down and you had these people seeing that they're not getting a seat at the table, that's when they resort to violence. And this is why you have folks that are aiding these horrible guys of ISIS who are, like you said, just commit atrocities. So at this point, in this moment, without tremendous effort and probably a lot of loss of life and treasure, I don't see it happening again. But we were actually at that point. We did have people at the table from all different sects.
20 seconds. Would airstrikes, in your military opinion, be enough to at least make ISIS knuckle under to some point?
No. No, I don't think so. I mean, even with airstrikes, you still need folks on the ground to be able to give proper intelligence for targeting and such, and to avoid and minimize civilian casualties. I just don't think so at this time.
Wow. Scott Taylor, thank you so much for joining us. No doubt we'll speak again on this, and let's just hope for our comrades and our members of the military over there that they stay safe. Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a great day.
I have to tell you, in the couple of hours that we've been on the air right now, some sobering thoughts that we've heard here today, and people are getting angry. They're angrier now than they were even yesterday. It continues on a day-by-day basis. Tell us what you think about what we have discussed here today. Send it to us via Twitter, via email, and via Facebook. We will read, we will look, we will discuss the things that you tell us, because this is Newsmax TV, news for a smarter generation, and Midpoint, where we question everything.